In a quiet neighborhood where rules were meant to protect, one man discovered they were being used to destroy. After 40 years serving his country, Robert Miller thought he'd found peace. But when a corrupt HOA president targeted his disabled son, he realized the real battle was just beginning. This isn't just a story about injustice. It's about standing up, fighting back, and rebuilding a community from the ground up. I spent 4 decades in the Marines. I've seen war zones, built cities from the ground up, and buried the love of my life. But nothing tested my resolve like the battle I faced in a place called Oak Ridge Estates, a neighborhood that promised peace and healing, but nearly broke the last of what I had left. After retiring, I finally bought the home my wife and I had dreamed of. She never got to see it. Cancer took her 3 years too soon, so I moved in with my 17-year-old son, Jason. Last year, during what was supposed to be a quiet father-son hunting trip, a freak fall from a tree stand left him paralyzed from the waist down. My boy, once full of motion and mischief, was now learning to live in a chair. We chose Oak Ridge because it was accessible, quiet, and close to the VA clinic. Jason needed safety. I needed stillness. And for a moment, we both had it. Until Carolyn Richards took over the HOA. Carolyn wasn't elected. She slid in when the previous president moved out mid-term. Nobody paid much attention. She had a professional background, claimed she would modernize things. But almost overnight, she turned our peaceful neighborhood into a gated war zone. She doubled the HOA fees, claimed it was for security improvements and community aesthetics. But what followed was anything but cosmetic. Suddenly, longtime residents were being fined for everything: flower pots, garden gnomes, truck tires slightly over the line. My driveway became a battlefield. My pickup, a clean, code-compliant vehicle, was hit with a $500 fine for oversized presence. My American flag, hung by the porch, was labeled non-standard. The wooden ramp I built for Jason was called a permanent structural change and given 30 days for removal. I knew intimidation when I saw it. Carolyn had a strategy. She didn't want retirees, veterans, or anyone who made the neighborhood look outdated. She wanted younger families with money. Developers had started sniffing around cash offers, fast flips. Carolyn wasn't just running an HOA. She was gutting a community to sell its bones. At first, I tried to be civil. I filed appeals. I offered to show compliance documents for everything I had built. She never replied. Then came the final blow. One afternoon, while I was out grabbing parts for a home modification, Carolyn and her so-called maintenance man showed up at our house. Jason was alone inside, watching cartoons. What happened next will never leave him or me. They walked into the yard with a saw, and in broad daylight, they cut Jason's wheelchair in half. He was parked at the window. He saw everything. He screamed, but no one came. When I returned 20 minutes later, I found the pieces of his wheelchair in a pile beside the sidewalk like garbage. Jason sat in the living room, fists clenched, face red, silent. The kind of silence that makes you ache. Carolyn was already gone, but she'd left a note. Obstruction removed. Violation corrected. That night, I stood over the twisted frame of my son's only mobility and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her. I was going to end her. The next day, I started gathering names: veterans, widows, older couples, anyone who had been fined or harassed since Carolyn took charge. I found stories worse than mine. One man had been threatened with foreclosure over a wind chime. Another woman's autistic grandson was labeled a nuisance. People were scared. They thought no one would listen. But I listened. We met in garages and backyards. Late-night coffee talks turned into strategy sessions. We compiled records, letters, fine notices, video clips, anything that showed Carolyn's selective enforcement and harassment. We discovered something bigger. Carolyn had been working with a local developer who offered her kickbacks if she could clear 10 specific homes. Every single one belonged to a veteran, a senior, or someone disabled. Then came the footage. Jason had recorded the moment from the window, Carolyn laughing while a man split his wheelchair down the middle. The tape was clear. No denial, no doubt. We waited for the HOA election. For the first time in Oak Ridge history, 80% of homeowners showed up. Most had never voted. Most had been silent, but not anymore. I stood in front of that crowd and spoke plainly. I didn't scream. I didn't insult. I showed them the tape. Carolyn's face didn't move. Not a blink. Then I played the audio from one of her HOA meetings, secretly recorded by a neighbor. Her voice was unmistakable. These old-timers and disabled people kill the resale value. Once we clean them out, Oak Ridge will finally shine. She tried to speak after, claimed we misunderstood, blamed the developer, accused me of manipulation, but the damage was done. I won the HOA presidency with 91% of the vote. Carolyn refused to concede. She filed complaints, called her lawyer, but we'd already contacted state authorities. What she'd done wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. She's now under investigation for civil rights violations, harassment, and property destruction. As for me, I got to work. I introduced a homeowner bill of rights. It protects the elderly, veterans, and families with medical needs. No fine can be issued without photographic proof and board approval. Medical accommodations can't be challenged. American flags. Fly them high, but the real change, it happened on the street. Neighbors started talking again, mowing each other's lawns, fixing roofs, sharing tools. Richard, a Vietnam vet who was once too afraid to leave his porch, now hosts Friday barbecues. And Jason, he moves through the neighborhood in a new, upgraded wheelchair, crowdfunded by neighbors who once kept their blinds closed. One morning, Jason looked at me and said, "It feels like I can breathe out here now." That hit deeper than anything. We didn't just take down a tyrant. We reclaimed a sense of belonging. People like Carolyn forget something. Veterans know how to fight, but more than that, we know how to rebuild. She thought she could silence us with threats, with saws, with fees. She thought people like us wouldn't stand up. She forgot who we were. I don't raise my voice. I raise communities. And we're just getting started.